So thanks everyone for coming. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be with us. And we're looking forward to talking to you today about this opportunity to do research as part of the XCEPT program. So my name is Charlie Derivas. I manage the XCEPT Research Fund, which is the grant and award-making facility of the XCEPT Research Program. I work for Comonix, an international development company that is leading this part of XCEPT and is responsible for managing the XCEPT Research Fund. Alongside me is Nina Sofoli, who is also working on the fund and on this particular call on conflict and climate. So the purpose of today's session is one, for us to give you a bit more information about what we're looking for from applications for this research opportunity, to go over how to apply, and to give you the opportunity to ask any questions. We'll present for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll open up to questions. So here's the agenda. We'll try and get through it all quite quickly. So we'll do a brief intro to XCEPT. We'll talk about this opportunity, who can apply, how we will assess your application. We'll also talk a little bit briefly at the end about a separate award, which is linked to the Conflict and Climate project, which is a research fellow, and then we'll come to questions. So just in terms of housekeeping, please write any questions you have into the chat. You will not be able to unmute and ask questions verbally, and we've got lots of people on the call, so you must write your questions into the chat, please. We're recording this session, and we will be sharing it online afterwards. And we may not get to all the questions today, or there may be some that we're not able to answer immediately. So in that case, we'll make sure that we respond to those questions in writing within a few days of the clarification questions deadline. Okay, so I'll just give you a brief introduction to XCEPT. So the Cross-Border Conflict Evidence, Policy and Trends Research Program examines transnational conflict dynamics, the drivers of violent and peaceful behaviour, and more effective international policy responses. XCEPT is funded by UK International Development from the UK government, and that's through the Research and Evidence Directorate, or RED, of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. So on XCEPT, we meld mixed methods research with innovative use of satellite and open data to deepen insight on hard to access areas. And then the programme includes the XCEPT Research Fund to enable research on emerging conflicts and to build evidence on what works to stabilise, resolve and prevent conflict. And this call for proposals falls under the XCEPT Research Fund. So as you can see, XCEPT covers a wide range of geographies, from West Africa all the way across the Horn, through the Middle East to Asia. In the past year, we've expanded into West Africa and the Lake Chad Basin. And in general, we are pretty flexible on geographies. So as long as you're proposing something that looks at ODA countries in Africa, the Middle East, and or Asia, then that works for us. In terms of our partners, so on the screen there, you can see our core partners. So they've been doing multi-year research on our key themes. But then we also bring on many more partners through the XCEPT Research Fund, which is what we'll get onto in a sec. So for the fund, these are the three main themes that we cover through the fund. So there's stability and governance in borderlands. So we've been doing research both with our core partners and through the fund on this topic for several years now, since 2018. So that's looking at things like what factors shape stability and governance in borderlands, who are the key actors involved and what are their interests, how does center-periphery contestation shape conflict in borderlands and across borders, and how does trade, licit and illicit, in borderlands intersect with transnational conflict? How are local livelihoods, governance and stability impacted? Oh, sorry, went too fast. On the cross-border enablers of conflict and peace, we're looking at things like how do conflicts connect across borders and regions? How do formal, informal, licit, illicit networks connect in cross-border conflict systems? And then we've also got conflict and climate. And this is obviously the this is the focus of this particular call. And just before we get on to that, I just want to mention a few of the objectives of the XCEPT Research Fund. So firstly, there's increasing understanding of the transnational dimensions of conflict, including how conflict and instability connect across borders and regions. Draw lessons from interventions to prevent, stabilize, and resolve conflict to inform more effective policy and program responses. So that's always thinking about what works, what doesn't work. Third, centering local knowledge in research and policy responses as much as possible. Fourth, advancing gender equality and social inclusion through research, design, and practice. And fifth, promoting the use of innovative technologies in conflict research, including remote sensing and artificial intelligence. And I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end when we talk about the kind of support that we will provide to fund awardees. Okay, so let's now talk about this particular funding opportunity. So XCEPT research on climate and conflict aims to generate evidence that helps policymakers more effectively address the challenges of the quintessentially transnational climate conflict nexus. So the UK government's latest integrated review talked about tackling climate change and environmental damage as a top UK priority, recognising the threats it poses globally and to the UK, both directly and indirectly as a multiplier of other threats. And there's been loads of research that indicates that contexts that are already fragile and affected by conflict are particularly vulnerable to climate stresses. But much research to date on climate change and conflict focuses on analysis of the problem, unpacking the causal relationships between the two. Now, XCEPT research will instead focus on analysis of solutions, so research that integrates responses at the intersection of climate change and conflict. So through this funding opportunity, XCEPT is hoping to give the opportunity to the winning applicant to give an opportunity to build a body of research that explores responses at the intersection of climate change and violent conflict. Okay, so a bit of key info about this award. We expect to make only one award, but the budget is relatively large. This is because we're asking you to do a detailed rapid evidence assessment to identify the gaps in the literature, then to design a research project or projects, and then to implement those projects with an eye to building a body of research. The period of performance, so we're expecting projects to last for around 2 years, 24 months. And we're obviously in the request for applications phase, and this process will only have one phase. And what will happen is once we've got all the applications together, an evaluation panel made up of experts from academia, UK government, and XCEPT will evaluate the applications and choose a winner. Okay, so in terms of the thematic and geographic scope. So obviously we're interested in research at the intersection of conflict and climate, but we're leaving it up to you to decide what you want to focus on. That said, there are a few parameters. So it should demonstrate a clear link to borderlands and/or the cross-border or transnational dimensions of violent conflict, and also to climate change. It should focus primarily on responses at the intersection of climate and conflict, be it interventions to adapt to or to mitigate the effects of climate change and/or interventions to prevent, stabilize, and resolve conflict. The research should seek to move beyond recommendations for specific programs, institutions, and local contexts to draw bigger picture lessons about the generalizability or not of what works and what doesn't work. In terms of geographies, the research proposed should link to XCEPT's geographies, which you can see there on the screen. But basically beyond that, we're leaving it up to you to decide what you want to focus on and how you want to do it. So we're leaving it deliberately broad, and we invite you to tell us and to evidence with the proposed literature review as part of the application form what today's most consequential questions are and what are the most important knowledge gaps. Okay, so the actual award what will that look like? So the applicant that wins, what are we expecting from the actual project? So there's 3 different phases to the project. Phase 1 will be a rapid evidence assessment. So this involves, this should be rigorous, systematic search and synthesis of the evidence to ensure that the projects that you subsequently design are filling an evidence gap. And you can see there's some of the deliverables as part of that. There's an inception report, there's the rapid evidence assessment itself, the REA. Then at the end of that process, there'd be a briefing note and a presentation based on the REA. In phase 2, there is the design of the research projects themselves. So the winning applicant will be invited to design a package of research that responds to the gaps identified in the rapid evidence assessment. So there's 2 different bits to that. There's the core research that would be designed and implemented by the core team itself, the team that you're putting forward. And the outputs that we would expect from that would be academic standard journal articles and the various outputs that go around that in terms of uptake and dissemination. But then there's also the opportunity to design other projects that would then be funded through the XCEPT Research Fund. So we hope this is something that's quite appealing in that you as a team would have the opportunity to design projects that are complementary to the work you are doing, but where you don't necessarily have the expertise within your team to carry them out. So this is an opportunity to bring in that expertise, or even to design whole separate complementary projects. And then we would do the job of commissioning those projects. And you could be as involved in that as you want to be in terms of the design and the implementation as well. Now, those complementary projects would be funded separately from this award, so it'd be outside of the 500K. However, any time that you propose for your core team to spend on those projects would draw down from the 500K budget. And then finally, there's the phase 3, which is the actual implementation of the research projects. So once you've put together that design and it's been approved by XCEPT, then the core team will implement the research projects you design, while the research fund will commission any complementary research projects. So that's what the project would actually look like. So in terms of our expectations for research funded through this award, XCEPT is a public good research program, and so we expect our researchers to meet the standards of high quality research. So it should be new and novel, it should use rigorous and robust research methodologies, it should adhere to internationally recognized ethical standards, and it should achieve policy impact and public benefit. Okay, I'll leave that there and turn over to Nina to talk about who can apply.
Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, sorry, some technical issues. If you can go on the next slides, please. So who can apply to this funding opportunity? So this funding opportunity is open to research organizations as well as consortia of researchers from different organizations, provided there's a lead organization. So as noted in the RFA document, if applying as a consortium, the lead organization will be responsible for contracting and managing downstream partners, as Chemonics will only issue 1 contract. We're particularly seeking applications from Global South researchers. So research organizations or a network of researchers based in the Global South are strongly encouraged to apply. In terms of collaboration, XCEPT is always encouraging collaborative research. Consider whether your approach would be strengthened through the participation of researchers from different disciplines. We're really kind of interested in seeing how we can break silos and really promoting interdisciplinary research. In addition, please do consider as well, partnerships between academics and policy professionals. So you could be able, for example, you could propose in your application to have multiple researchers as well as policy professionals in your team. And that's all fine for us and encouraged again. Next slide, please. So how to apply? So to apply, you'll be required to complete the following application documents. I'll go into each detail, like a detail kind of outlined in the next slides. But firstly, you'll need to complete the applicant self-assessment form. Secondly, you will need to complete the application form. Thirdly, you'll need to complete the budget template. And then finally, please do not forget to send the CVs of your core team members. To note, this is available on our website, but the deadline for submission is September 9th. 11:59 London time, so BST. And please do send all these documentation electronically to the XCEPT@chemonics.com email address, referencing G026 as the application number. Next slide, please. So the first document in the application package is the self-assessment form. The self-assessment form is basically a due diligence checklist. It includes questions related to governance, internal control processes, financial management, ability to deliver, and due diligence management of downstream partners. If you're applying as part of a consortium, the lead organization will be filling out the form with their information. So please do not include information from your downstream partners unless asked to in a specific section. Please do also provide documents as requested in a self-assessment form. For example, you might have to provide financial documentation as part of your application. So please do pay attention to the wording in the self-assessment form, because it will tell you what you need to provide at the application stage. In addition, the shortlisted applicant will be required to provide copies of policies and other documents as listed in their self-assessment form. And XCEPT will also conduct reference and visual checks during the pre-contracting process. Next slide, please. So now the meat of your application is in the application form. So you'll see in this image, the first section is the applicant's information. And then the second section is project overview. Then you will be required to answer multiple technical questions. You can find more information on what we're looking for in the RFA document that's available on our website. And this is kind of broken down into specific sections. If you can go to the next slide. So firstly, you will be asked to answer the literature review question. So this review should include a statement of the questions or issues you view as relevant to the scope of work. It should then review the literature to demonstrate the research gap and explain why it's important. Secondly, you'll be asked to provide your approach to the rapid evidence assessment, so phase 1. This includes, for example, how you'll be searching or screening studies, how you'll be assessing the quality and relevance of studies, and how you'll be synthesizing findings. Thirdly, you'll be asked to present ideas for the new research projects. So based on the gaps identified in the literature review, you should propose a package of research to be implemented by the core team. This proposal should address how you will ensure coherence and synthesis across strands, and how you'll be able to kind of move beyond recommendations for specific programs and institutions and really draw bigger picture lessons on what works and what doesn't. So for example, in this section, please provide information on key research question, choice of geographies, methodology, proposed outputs, what stakeholders you will involve, and expected impact. You may also consider ideas for complementary research to be funded by the XCEPT Research Fund. Specifically, for example, additional expertise or analysis not available within the core team. So, this could be, for example, satellite imagery or other kind of research methods. Then you'll be asked to describe your approach to ethics, safeguarding risk and duty of care. So please describe how you will analyze risk and ensure the safety and security of the researchers and research subjects. And please also do describe how you will integrate gender and conflict-sensitive research practices into your approach. Then you'll be asked to provide information on your research team and track records. So basically, this is where you will really put information about your core research team and their roles and responsibilities, explaining why you have selected this team to best deliver the proposed research, describing the track record of the team, relevance of the networks, showing evidence of your ability to really produce rigorous, high-quality research outputs, and describe how individuals from Global South will be meaningfully participating in the awards. Finally, there will be questions on value for money, which you'll be asked to describe how you will oversee the project and financial management of this funding and how the proposed costs are achieving value for money. Next slides, please. So in the budget section, applicants are required to submit a budget as part of your application. Please do make sure that the costs that you're adding into your budget are eligible with FCDO guidance. And so they're aligned with that. There's a link in the RFA documents in like specific FCDO guidance in that regard. But if you do have any queries, please do send questions on eligible costs to us before the clarification deadline, and we can get back to you on what can be added in your budget. So as previously mentioned by Charlie, this award will be structured in 3 phases. And so your budget application will also be kind of basically broken down into 3 different stages. So for phase 1 and 2, you will be asked to provide a detailed breakdown, budget breakdown covering where applicable staff costs, including daily rates, equipment, travel and accommodation, event costs, administration, overhead costs. Obviously, this list is non-exhaustive, and in terms of material cost, you can tailor that as you see fit based on your proposal. And then for phase 3, and then for phase 1 and 2, the budget is expected to cost a maximum of 10% of the total value of this awards. And then for phase 3, applicants should provide also a budget, but this will be slightly less detailed than for phase 1 and 2. And so the template has been adjusted in that regard. Applicants should provide indication of time spent per proposed team members along with their day rates. And then you'll be asked to provide indicative budget lines for material costs, such as travel, data collection, and uptake. So this will just be kind of like major expense category and does not need to be broken down as detailed as in the phase 1 and 2 budgets. Next slide, please. So you will see in the budget templates, there are multiple tabs. Please first start with the detailed budgets per phases. So the phase 1 tab, the phase 2 tab, and the phase 3 tabs. Next slide, please. Once you've completed this, please update the summary tab with the total for like each category. So, you will see at the bottom of each of the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 tabs that, there'll be like total cost for personnel, activities, equipment. So this tab is really where you'll put like all of these total breakdowns. Please do make sure, as this is hard entered, that like it matches across all the tabs before you submit your application.
Okay, back to me. So how will we assess your application? So your applications will be assessed by an evaluation panel. If I just bring up the scoring, you can see there the scoring across the different pieces that Nina mentioned earlier. You'll note that the scoring is skewed towards the literature review slightly. So there's 30 points available for that. And that's because we're expecting you to make a really good case for the gaps in the literature. And then the team selected for this award is expected to then build on that literature review as part of the rapid evidence assessment that you do during phase 1 of the award. Similarly, we expect that the ideas for new projects that you submit as part of your proposal, that's that point 3 there, worth 30 points, we expect that those will need to be adjusted, right, as part of the phase 2 design of new research projects, so informed by the gaps identified in your rapid evidence assessment. So the purpose of asking for those project concept notes as part of the proposal is primarily to understand your basic research ideas at this point and how you design research projects, so we can get a sense of that. In terms of the timeline, so the call's been open for a couple of weeks. We're having the information session today. The clarification questions deadline is the end of this week. So if you have any questions, please email them in. We will respond, it's not on the timeline, but we will respond to those next week and make sure that we publish an FAQ document on the website. And then the deadline for applications is the 9th of September, as Nina mentioned. And then at the end of September, we're hoping to be able to tell the shortlisted applicant who they are. We will have gone through the evaluation process with a hope that we'll be able to do negotiation and contracting during October and get the project started towards the end of October. So that's kind of about the award. I just wanted to mention some of the support that we provide as a team, as XCEPT, to any fund awardees who are coming on. So research management and implementation. So we have an XCEPT support team, and we want you to see us as alongside you throughout the process, not the application process, but once we get to the award itself. So whether that's in meeting the different elements of the award, thinking through how to accommodate changes to planning or complexities that might arise. There's also remote method support. So it's mentioned in the applications document, but we have in-house capacity to support with remote methods, so satellite imagery, open source investigations, and just as an example of what that looks like. So for example, one of our core partners, Chatham House, we're doing some work on Sinjar in Iraq, and so we sorted out with them. We brought on our partners, Satellite Applications Catapult, to do some work for them. So that's one example of that. And then here, this was something on on Ethiopia-Sudan border. So that's something we offer as support, which is outside of the budget. So that's something that we would fund separately. There's also research engagement and policy uptake. So there's a strong interest in XCEPT research among donors, so governments, multilaterals, etc. And we will support you in engaging with these donors and stakeholders with an eye toward what policymakers are looking for in research and evidence. So we would help in preparation for these exchanges, and we have people on our team who are ex-government who are always thinking about what's how to translate this evidence for policy action. There's quality assurance and expert consultation. So we will review research planning and research design and offer a layer of review throughout. And if specialist advice is required, we will help you find that. And as mentioned, we're bringing on expert research fellows covering each basket of research who can support you along the way. Publication support and research communications. So we have editors and graphic designers who can make your research look great, and comms professionals who can support the most impactful dissemination of your findings through designing comms campaigns, etc. And finally, if you win this project, then you'll be joining the XCEPT research community, and you'll be joining our XCEPT family of researchers. So that's opportunities to meet with other researchers, to present jointly at different events, and yeah, it's joining the XCEPT family. Okay, so I think that's it for our presentation. Oh no, it's not. I spoke too soon. Sorry. So I should have mentioned that alongside this project, we are also soliciting, putting out a solicitation for an XCEPT research fellow in the conflict and climate space. So that is someone who will support and lead research development, commissioning and uptake under the theme of conflict and climate across borders. And what will they be required to do? They'll be developing the XCEPT research agenda on conflict and climate. They'd be leading independent research on conflict and climate. They'd be shaping our commissioning. And then they'd be presenting in academic, public and policy spheres, and also expanding our networks. And finally, advising our researchers in delivery of rigorous research and quality assurance of outputs. So the deadline for that position, I believe, is the 19th of August. So that kind of sits alongside this other project, and we'll be, we hope would be working with them, would be offering advice, but really we're looking for a senior academic to take on that role. and it would be a kind of part-time arrangement, so 20 to 60% of full-time employment. We'd expect them to be on for at least 2 years, but we're pretty flexible. And to apply, you just need to send a letter of motivation via email and your CV, as I mentioned, by Monday, the 19th of August. Okay, so that is the research fellow. I wanted to mention that because they will kind of be sitting alongside this other project. Okay, so we are now at questions, and I see some questions have already come in. So I will, actually there's lots of questions that have already come in. So I'm just going to answer some of them kind of rapid fire. So there's one question about intellectual property rights and who owns the intellectual property rights. So we are funded by the XCEPT by the FCDO Research and Evidence Directorate, and that means that it's slightly different to other FCDO funded programs, for example, through ISF, which is what used to be CSSF. So the organisation doing the research, or the research fellow doing the research, they would own the intellectual property for what they're doing. So yes, it is. It's not owned by FCDO. It's not owned by us at Chemonics. It is owned by the organisations doing the research. That was one question. There was another question about the complementary research. So the question was, are these additional research questions we think of but are beyond our capacity, or additional geographic regions that we perceive as potentially helpful comparative data beyond our team's reach? So it could be both of those. I mean, the main point of the complementary research is that we here at XCEPT have this funding platform, the XCEPT Research Fund, through which we can fund additional research. So there's the 500k for your specific project, but if there's interesting things that come up that you either think are outside your expertise or outside your regions but complement what you've been doing, then you could put together some research questions related to that and say, hey, we're really interested in this. It's not quite appropriate for our team, but we think there's scope there. Then that's something that we could take as the XCEPT Research Fund and commission new research. And as I mentioned, you can be as involved in that as you want. It might just be that you come up with some initial research questions and say, hey, we think this would be interested, but actually we don't have time to work on these complementary projects. Or it could be that you want to be more involved, and you want to be involved in the evaluation process for the commissions, or you want to be holding a kind of quality assurance role, or you want to be doing mentoring if it's a lower capacity organization. So it's a way of us expanding out and using our funding platform to be able to commission new interesting research. I hope that answers that one. Okay, I see another one. There's a question about whether there's flexibility in the REA timelines. Potentially, yes. We realise it's quite quick to put together a whole rapid evidence assessment. I mean, in your application, please stick to the timelines we've suggested. But as a research program, we understand that sometimes it's sometimes things slip, and we probably can be a little bit flexible. But in your application, please stick to the timelines that we've suggested in the request for applications document. Okay, there's a question about the geographic focus. Can the region of study be just one region, country, or does it have to include maximum focus geographies? So I think that's saying, does it need to include at least 2 or more geographies? Obviously, we are a cross-border conflict research program, so we're interested in borderlands, we're interested in the transnational dimensions of conflict. So by definition, we'd expect you to be looking at more than one country, and potentially one region. if you're able to look at more than one region within the budget, then that's of interest to us. It's just what you can do within what you think you can do within your budget. We're interested in comparative case studies, across different regions, but it does need to be feasible. So in short, we are definitely interested in projects that are looking at more than one country. Okay, there's a question here which is about fiduciary risks. So working with large consortia with partners from the global south creates significant fiduciary risks, for example, misuse of funds, or which my university is not well placed to assess or manage, even if we have the policies listed in the self-assessment form. Would you expect the lead organisation to conduct fiduciary assessments of all partners, or will Chemonics conduct any fiduciary risk assessment of all partners before selecting when a consortia? Thanks. That's an interesting question. Ideally, we would want the lead organisation to be able to manage their downstream partners. And that, I suppose, includes doing the relevant risk assessments and things. However, I mean, bearing in mind that these partners would most likely be brought on in the kind of phase 3 once you're getting to the research projects. And given that we as Chemonics XCEPT have a lot of experience working with organizations all over the world with lots of different levels of capacity, then I think there's a way that we could support. It would just be a conversation with the organization, I think. And maybe that's something to note in your self-assessment form, that the point of the self-assessment form, it's, as you're going through it, and it says this at the top, answering no does not mean that you're disqualified. The point of the self-assessment form is for us to understand your capacities as an organization and where we might need to support you. So if it is if it is, for example, in this kind of space, then I think, I hope there's a bit in the self-assessment form that allows you to say that, and then we can work out what kind of support we would need to provide as Chemonics XCEPT. I hope that answers that question. There's a quick question. Are previous awardees eligible? Yes. Yep. If you've received an award through the XCEPT Research Fund before, then you're eligible to apply again. That's fine. So I'm not really bunching these into thematic things. I'm just answering as I'm seeing them coming up. I hope that's okay. There's a question, the geographical focus of XCEPT is quite broad. What minimum inclusion of the different areas under scrutiny do you wish to see in proposals for this research? Okay, so I've kind of covered that in the when I mentioned before about the geographic focus. As mentioned, we don't have a kind of necessary inclusion or exclusion criteria. I think we would just expect it to be looking across borders. That's our only criteria there, really. Hello, is it possible for applicants to apply with their current affiliations but move the project to another institution listed as the official host institution if the grant is awarded? That seems a little bit, I think I'd probably need to understand a bit more in terms of why you would want to do that. I think we would expect the organisation that the organisation that is applying to be the lead organisation throughout. But if there's a particular reason why you would need to do that, then maybe you could just write in the chat why that would need to be the case, just so we can understand that. So there's another question again about kind of past awardees. If current awardees are allowed to apply for this call, they are. We haven't discussed anything about this call with any of our current awardees, so there would be no conflict of interest there. And in any of our interactions with our current awardees, we won't be discussing this call. So yes, you are okay to apply to this, even if you are currently receiving an award from the XCEPT Research Fund. Okay, so I'm going through these quite quickly. There's another question. Limiting study of the Middle East to ODA eligible countries will remove the Arab countries on the Persian Gulf and Israel from the equation. Is that a correct consequence? Sorry, is that correct? Is that our intention? That's a good point. I mean, so our funds come from UK international development. So in that way, they typically need to be spent for the well-being of I'm sure you're all aware of the wording to benefit ODA eligible countries. So maybe I'll come back to you on this one. I think in general, we would encourage you to keep it to ODA eligible countries. You could have, as a comparison, some non-ODA countries, but let me come back to this because I'll need to discuss it with our team. That's a good point. Okay, next question. Are pilot interventions considered an eligible expenditure? I think we would need to know a little bit more about what you're proposing. This is obviously a research. This is a research project. What you'll ultimately be doing are research projects, and we're not necessarily in the business of kind of funding interventions at this phase. So my gut there says no, but you would probably need to maybe if you write that question up as an email and just explain a bit more about what you're thinking, then we can reply formally via email. Okay. Next question is about overheads. So are overhead costs covered under this grant? How many research projects are you expecting to be outlined in the application form? Overhead. Yes, yeah, the overhead costs will be covered through the grant. And actually the next question relates to this. It says it doesn't have a line for overheads. So how should we include eligible indirect costs in the budget?
I think this basically depends whether your overhead cost is kind of like a percentage of the award. In that case, you can just put it in the kind of material cost section as a line under other direct costs. And if you do have overhead, please do explain how you've kind of calculated that in the kind of column H. So you'll see there's like a budget note, and then you can include information on this. If, for example, overhead are within daily rates for staff, then just put the final kind of like daily rate amounts, and then again you can just add in the column H information on any kind of overhead included in that.
Yeah, and we would in general encourage you to include as much information as possible in that budget narrative column. That's column H, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. In that budget narrative. And to your second question, how many research projects are you expecting to be outlined in the application form? So if you think through how the budget breakdown goes, where the maximum, we're kind of expecting 10% maximum. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking in the application form. It's up to you really. It could just be that you are planning to use I suppose it's 450k pretty much. Is left over after you've done the rapid evidence assessment and the design of the research projects. So if you just want to do one research project as part of that, that's okay. You won't be marked any differently. We would probably expect if it's just one big research project that there might be some kind of sub projects as part of that, or case studies or something like that. But yeah, all we're aiming for really with your idea for research projects is to get a sense of what projects you think would be interesting based on your literature review, based on your understanding of the field, and then to see how you construct a project, and so that we have confidence that when it gets to that point of the project, phase 3, then we have the confidence that you know what you're doing, basically. Okay, there's great. Yes, there's a question about the research fellow. Yeah, are they oversight? Are they doing the research? Are they SME, so a subject matter expert? Yes, so as mentioned, they certainly will be a subject matter expert. So it's separate to the main project in that they basically within our team here at XCEPT, we don't have very strong expertise on conflict and climate within our core team. So we want to make sure that any research that we're doing on conflict and climate is as rigorous as possible, and that's why we want to bring on a research fellow. So they would both have the opportunity to do their own research. They would also have an opportunity to shape our future research. So beyond this commissioning call, shape any future research we do on conflict and climate. And actually, well, I can just go back to this this page so you can see the other things. We would expect that person to be presenting XCEPT in different fora, whether it's academic fora, with policymakers, etc. And then in terms of their role, kind of linked to the projects that we've funded, the 500K project, what we're envisioning is that they would kind of provide some advisory support. So they would they would offer their expertise where needed. They might have a role in quality assurance. We haven't quite worked out whether we want to include that or not. Probably yes, because they will obviously be part of the program and they will have their expertise in the field. And for that reason, that's something I wanted to mention because it was a question that came up. It relates to whether you can have the XCEPT research fellow on conflict and climate also leading the 500K project, and the answer to that is probably not, because they might have that QA role. So then there would be a conflict of interest. So we would encourage people who are thinking of applying to both to still apply for both, but then understand that when it gets to the evaluation and working that out, then something might have to give. If you happen to be in the organization which is putting forward the best application, and you also happen to be the best person for the research fellow, then we would have to have a discussion there as to how that might work, because we can't have the research fellow quality assuring some of the work of the research project if they're also involved in the research project, right? There would be a conflict of interest. Okay. There's a question there on should the lead researcher work for the lead organization? Not necessarily. It kind of depends how you want to structure it. It might be that you have a lead organization who are really good at managing downstream partners and all of that, and then the lead researcher works for a different organization. That's okay. Can you provide more clarity on the solutions or solution-oriented aspect of the call? What does that mean? So kind of a big part of what we're trying to do through the XCEPT Research Fund is look at the so what question, right? There's lots of research on conflict dynamics, on what's going on telling us about the problem, but not so much on the so what, on what does that mean for what works, what doesn't work. So this is focused on that conflict response side, right? So we're interested in analysis of solutions, as in analysis of interventions, that kind of thing, But importantly, FCDO Red, the Research and Evidence Directorate, they're not looking for just, okay, you've come up with some specific recommendations for this specific program, and how that program should improve. What we're looking for is bigger picture stuff, right? Things that will actually move the field. So that's where that kind of focus on solutions comes through, and that is quite important. Do we welcome consortia of academics and INGOs, or is this limited to policymaking stakeholders? No, that's fine. We're pretty open in terms of the kinds of organisations who can apply. The main thing is that we just want to have high quality research. So you should be able to demonstrate that your organisation or the people that you're working with have a track record of delivering high quality research in this field. So there's a question about Global South and what that means. So sorry, I should have clicked through back to the Q&A section. Okay, so in terms of Global South, yeah, what does that mean? Yes, the organisation should be based in a Global South country, which for our definition is a ODA receiving country. They don't need to have a counterpart in the north. That's fine, but they should be based in one of those countries. Are applications from LPCs, limited private companies, accepted? Good question. I think yes, but we will come back to that. I'm pretty sure we're okay with that. Again, you just need to demonstrate that you have that you are able to that you have the research track record. Okay, so we've only got 5 minutes left, but we're getting through these. As I mentioned, we might not get through all of these today, but in any case, we will be writing up answers to all of these questions and posting them on the website. What is the editorial process like? Will the proposing organizations have editorial control, or is XCEPT involved in those decisions? Is branding of the outputs under XCEPT or co-branded? So in terms of branding, that's an easy question. It should be co-branded. So we'd expect you to put the XCEPT logo on there, and the UK International Development logo on there as well. But then obviously your logo as well. The editorial process, if you have a publications department, then that's great. We're happy for them to handle the editorial process in terms of copy editing, typesetting, that kind of stuff. But we can also provide support as needed. One thing worth noting is that we, because we ultimately hold the contract with FCDO, then we are ultimately responsible for the research that comes out. So we do have a quality assurance function. So any outputs that are submitted to us will be reviewed by us. Now, we don't necessarily have, we might not have subject matter experts in the field where in the specific area that you're proposing to do work on. We won't be reviewing it from that point of view. We'll be reviewing it more from the point of view of, does this, we're all kind of researchers or ex-researchers or ex-policy people, so we have a sense of, what's good and what's not, and that's the view that we'll be taking as we go as we review the research. Okay. There's another question here about what emphasis will you place on outreach dissemination plans when evaluating proposals? Can we suggest multimedia, i.e. a short movie or video as part of project dissemination? Yes, that's great. We're open. We deliberately haven't told you what kind of outputs we exactly what outputs we want to see as part of your ideas for project ideas for new research projects. So yes, we would encourage you to be creative, and yeah, you're very welcome to suggest different multimedia as part of project dissemination. And that kind of fits with the previous question, which is this question from Lamia: how many overall outputs are you expecting for the project period? What's the time frame of the project itself? So the time frame is indicated in the request for applications document, and that I think we're saying that we're expecting you to have completed phases 1 and 2 by, I believe it's 4 months, I think, after the project's start date. So that gives you a sense of when, what the time frame would be for the actual research projects themselves. In terms of how many overall outputs, it's good. Yeah, as mentioned, we're open. You know, the main thing is that we expect some of the outputs to be academic quality papers, and that's kind of detailed in the request for applications document. But we are, beyond that, we're kind of leaving it up to you to suggest what you might produce, and bearing in mind, you know, you'll be suggesting stuff now, but obviously there will be obviously when it gets to actually designing the research project, you know, what the research project that you design then as part of phase 2 might end up looking quite different to what you're putting forward now, because you will have done the rapid evidence assessment. So you might have found that the literature points you in different ways than you thought. Okay, so we only have 1 minute left, and there's still a few questions outstanding. So we will take a note of these questions, and we will answer those in an FAQs doc that we will share. What we might do, because there's been so many questions here, is we'll aim to share a document this week, and then bearing in mind that the deadline for the clarification questions is the end of this week, then we will also then we'll share an updated version of it next week, but just so that you have answers to these outstanding questions and the questions that we've answered so far as soon as possible. So it will help you in writing up your proposals. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but we will, as mentioned, we will answer those soon. I hope you found this useful. We will be putting this on the XCEPT website in the next couple of days. So do share it with anyone who missed it, who you think might be interested. So that's all. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.